the director of FIBA, Diane Freiberger, and we have got managing director of ASIN, Irin Wasser, the deputy managing director, Runi Heinz of ACAS, and we have got the chair of the executive board of Quality Assurance Agency in Slovakia, Professor Robert Redheimer. So then if I am to give you an information about our meeting, we will have our speakers to present their topics in 20 or 25 minutes, and in the last minute they will be answering your questions. We expect that you write your questions on the chat section, and we will try to screen those questions. Now, I hope that this meeting will be very valuable both to the universities in their internal quality assurance, as well as the quality assurance agencies, 22 of them in Turkey. And that this could be a small step in their long journey to the membership to ENQA. Now, I will stop here, and I would like to invite the president of STAR, Professor Ismail Erkam Tüzgen, to give his welcoming speech to our invited speakers, as well as to the audience participants. Professor Ismail Erkam Tüzgen, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Professor. Dear participants, welcome to STAR's online conference on quality standards in higher education. As the chairman of the board of directors of STAR, I'd like to thank all the participants, invited speakers, and all the team who contributed for this event. I'd like to give you some information about STAR. STAR stands for Social Science, Humanities, and Basic Science Accreditation and Rating Association in Turkish. And STAR has been established to promote the development of especially undergraduate programs in these sciences, social sciences, humanities, and basic sciences, and to continuously improve them to ensure the quality of education and training, and to conduct the evaluation and accreditation of undergraduate programs. Our mission is to contribute to achieving excellence in student education through evidence-based accreditation that supports continuous improvement. And our vision is excellence in education of social sciences, humanities, and basic sciences. And we value social orientation, continuous learning, value creation, developing collaborations, ethical behavior, transparency, and accountability. And as Professor Bıçak said, there are 22 national accreditation agencies in Turkey and 13 international accreditation agencies in Turkey. Now I'd like to also give some information about the programs we have accredited so far. We have received our first applications in 2021. And in total, we have received 75 accreditation applications from 32 universities until July of 2023. And from these applications, accreditation evaluations of 30 programs are completed. with 6 programs being accredited for 5 years and the others receiving accreditation for varying durations of 2 or 3 years. It is noted that business administration programs have received the highest number of accreditations among all other fields. In 2023, applications made by 4 programs were not accepted. And in total, 28 programs from 12 universities applied to be reviewed by STAR in this year, in 2023. I don't want to speak for a long time because we have very distinguished guests today. Lastly, I want to greet you all with the hope that this conference will be a productive one. Thanks once again for your attendance. Thank you very much. Professor Bıçak, your mic is off.
So I would like to thank to our president of STAR, and then I would like to invite Professor Dr. Ayşegül Kozak Çakır to have her welcoming speech on behalf of the president of YÖKAK, Higher Education Quality Council in Turkey. So Professor Dr. Ayşegül Kozak Çakır, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you. Hi, thank you, Dr. Ayşegül Kozak. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants and dear colleagues, on behalf of Turkish Higher Education Quality Council, Ümit Kocabıçak, who is unable to attend due to health reasons, I am honored to welcome you all to the STAR Accreditation International Conference. Your presence here is a testament to your commitment to enhancing the field of higher education and quality assurance, and your dedication to the betterment of our universities and quality assurance agencies. This conference revolves around the topic that holds the key to the future of higher education, ESG. These standards and guidelines represents the cornerstone of quality assurance in higher education across Europe and beyond. They provide a comprehensive framework that guidelines universities and quality assurance agencies in achieving their goals of maintaining and enhancing the quality of higher education and research. In today's rapidly changing world, the role of universities and quality assurance agencies goes beyond traditional academic pursuits. We must embrace the broader responsibilities that comes with our positions, from protecting the environment and fostering the inclusive communities to strategizing effective governance frameworks. In an era marked by a rapid technological advancements, changing student expectations, and global dissemination of knowledge, it has become imperative for our higher education institutions to adhere to ESG. These guidelines offer a robust foundation for universities to adapt, innovate, and continually improve their program and services. They emphasize the importance of stakeholder engagement, transparency, and accountability, the principles that are essential for fostering excellence in education. Moreover, ESG plays a crucial role in promoting international collaboration and mobility among students and academics. By adhering to these guidelines, our universities can ensure their programs are aligned with international standards, making it easier for students to transfer credits and pursue educational opportunities in various countries. This, in turn, contributes to the development of a globally competitive higher education landscape. As we gather here today, we encourage you to engage in meaningful discussions, share best practices, and explore innovative approaches to implementing and improving ESGs. Together, we can ensure that our higher education institutions are well equipped to meet challenges of the 21st century and provide students with knowledge and skills they need to thrive in ever-changing world. In closing, we would like to express our sincere wish for a successful and productive conference. May your deliberations today lead to valuable insights, meaningful collaborations, and a deeper understanding of how ESG can guide us toward excellence in higher education and quality assurance. Thank you for your dedication for this important cause, and we look forward to witnessing the positive impact of your discussions on future of higher education. Thank you again and enjoy the conference.
So I would like to thank Professor Dr. Ayşegül Kozak-Çakır for her welcoming speech. And now it is time for our conference. And I would like to invite our very first speaker, the director of ENQA, Anna Grover. And before I give the floor to her, I would like to mention that Anna Grover is the director of the ENQA. This is the European Quality Assurance Network of Higher Education. She is managing the work of ENQA Secretariat, and also she works with the ENQA board. She coordinates the ENQA's input to quality assurance policy developments within the European higher education area and internationally. And she represents ENQA in the events and meetings across Europe and beyond. Anna Grover, she has at least 10 years of experience in the quality assurance in higher education. And within these 10 years, she worked for European University Association before she joined to ENQA. Okay, Anna Grover, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the kind introduction, and indeed for the invitation to join you today and to speak on the topic of the ESG, a topic that is, of course, very close to my heart and founding all the operations of ENQA that we work on across Europe. I'm just going to share my screen. I have a presentation for today. It's a huge pleasure for me to address you today, and I hope that what I can do is give a bit of an overview of the ESG and its place within the European higher education framework, quality assurance framework. Some of you I know may be familiar with this, some less so, but I hope that even for those that are already quite familiar with the ESG, it's always helpful to have a brief refresher and remind ourselves of the broader framework in which we're working. And as has already been alluded to, we are looking ahead towards a revision of the ESG. So I will give a little bit of an insight into what kind of discussions are going on in that context. Just perhaps a disclaimer not to get your hopes up too much to manage expectations. I won't be able to tell you exactly what is going to change. That hasn't been decided yet. We're very early on in this discussion process. But I can give you, sorry, Ronnie, if that's why you're here to get the, I see your gestures at the corner of my eye on my screen. So if that's why you were here, I'm sorry to disappoint, but I will give a little bit of a flavor of the discussions and the directions in which this revision might go. A few brief words, if I may, about ENQA itself. We are the representative body of quality assurance agencies in the European higher education area. So our role is really to represent the voice of our members in the policy discussions, specifically as part of the Bologna process, but also globally. And on the other side, to provide services to our members and our stakeholders. And as part of that, we try to drive forward the development of external QA in Europe. As has already been mentioned, we have 57 members, and those members are all quality assurance agencies in the European higher education area that have undergone an external review, a peer review against the ESG, and have proven themselves to be substantially compliant with the ESG. But what I do also want to bring attention to is that we have 48 affiliates, and our affiliates are a range of different organizations. Many of them are agencies that are in the process of becoming compliant with the ESG, and we work with these agencies very, very closely to support them in that process. And you'll hear later today from Robert from the Slovakian Accreditation Agency, and he will be able to tell you a little bit about that journey. We also have amongst our affiliates agencies that are based outside the European higher education area, so not eligible for full membership, but nonetheless want to be engaged with our work, and also other organisations that want to follow the discussions on quality assurance in the European higher education area. To start with, I just want to draw your attention to the diversity of the external QA landscape in Europe. And I think throughout my presentation, but also throughout everything that you hear this morning, I think it's really important for you to keep this in mind, because the European higher education framework has to be flexible enough to provide, on the one hand, a strong framework so that we're all working to the same set of basic principles and standards, but on the other hand, to take into the account this diversity. We didn't all come from the same starting point. We all have different national and local cultures and histories and traditions. The development of our higher education sectors and our quality assurance frameworks have followed very different paths and have landed where they are today for specific reasons, the set of circumstances in which they've developed. And what it means is that we have some countries where there's program level accreditation, others where we have it at institutional level. Most do a combination of both. We have agencies that work specifically just on learning and teaching. Others cover also research, others are specific to a particular discipline area or subject. We have agencies that work in one specific national context, but we also have agencies that work across several countries and indeed globally. We have agencies where the consequence of a review is essentially a license for an institution to operate, an accreditation for them to operate, whereas others are more enhancement-led and there's no yes/no decision at the end of the process. And we also have a huge variety of the language in which we use. So we have evaluations, we have audits, we have accreditations, and these things mean different things in different contexts. So just to keep this in mind throughout the discussions that we have today, that this diversity is a positive thing, and it's something that we should embrace, and it's something that we always keep in mind with the further development of the ESG, so that we continue to make room for this diversity. The aim of a common framework for quality assurance is not that everybody should be doing everything in exactly the same way, but rather that we work to the same set of basic principles and standards. So the development of European quality assurance, very much in the context of the Bologna process, it's always been an action line of the Bologna process. And as you've heard already, we had the first version of the ESG in 2005. It was co-authored by what we call the E4 group, which consists of the main stakeholder representative organizations of agencies, of institutions, and of students. And this is really important because I think one of the, what we always say, one of the success factors of quality assurance in Europe is that it is driven by the stakeholders and that it is formed on the basis of wide stakeholder consultation. So there's a broad ownership of the framework that we're all working in. In 2008, ECHAR was set up, the register for quality assurance agencies, and this is essentially a sort of white list of agencies that are working in compliance with ESG. And then in 2015, we had the first revision of the ESG, and a new version was adopted by the Ministers of Education in the European higher education area. And this again was developed by the E4 group in cooperation with ECHAR, but also other stakeholder organizations, namely Education International and Business Europe, in order to take into account the wider context in which we're working. At the same time, there was a new framework adopted, which was the European approach for quality assurance of joint programs. And this is very much in line with the ESG. It is based on the ESG, but it is a specific approach for the accreditation of joint programs, which was proving to be a challenging area in the development in Europe. And this allowed, or in principle, it should allow for a reduction in the sort of duplication of accreditation processes that joint programs have to go through. As ever, the commitments on paper don't necessarily translate immediately into reality, and there's still quite a lot of work to be done to ensure that this approach is widely known and used, but it is there. And in 2018, quality assurance was named as one of the three key commitments of the Bologna process. This seems quite late in the whole process, but as I said at the start, QA has always been a key action line within the development of the EHEA. So coming to the ESG itself, it's composed of three parts. Part one for the internal of quality assurance within institutions. Part two for the external QA that is conducted by agencies. And part three guides the operation and the framework for agencies themselves. And you'll hear from our speakers later this morning more detail about each of those sections, so I won't go into detail there. But what I do want to draw your attention to is the introduction. It's often the part of the ESG that gets forgotten. You dive straight into the content, the standards, what it is that you have to do. But the introduction is really important because it frames the whole document. It sets out the purposes, the principles, and the scope of the ESG. And without that, it's very difficult to understand how the standards in the rest of the parts should be applied. What's also important is that the parts build on each other. So the first standard of part two makes explicit reference to part one. It says that QA agencies in their work need to cover all the areas addressed by part one. So it's important that you look at the document as a whole, while it's true that certain sections will be of specific interest to specific stakeholders. And the purposes, well, actually, this was set out very, very nicely in the various introductory speeches that we've had for today's session. That the ESG are there to set our common framework that we all work within to support mutual trust between higher education systems, and that's really important, as has already been said, for mobility and for international partnerships and for recognition of qualifications. I'm just going to highlight a few things that that are set out in the introduction for the ESG. And the first one is that it is higher education institutions that have the primary responsibility for the quality and the quality assurance of their provision. And sometimes this gets a little bit forgotten, particularly working in agencies, that that you have your set of standards that you work with, and want to apply those to the institutions. And of course, that's our job within agencies. But ultimately, what the job of agencies is to check that the institutions have the policies and the practices in place to be doing this work themselves. The agencies are there as an external verification of that, not with a role of doing the internal quality assurance themselves. As I've said, the quality assurance needs to respond to the diversity of systems, institutions and programs and students that we have within the European higher education area. It's based on the needs and expectations of stakeholders, and it should support the development of a quality culture. So it's not just about the accountability side of quality assurance, but also about supporting the entire education community to come together and take responsibility for quality of higher education. The scope, it's important to remember that the ESG applies specifically to learning and teaching. There are, of course, links to research and innovation, and indeed the third mission of universities, the sort of social mission, but the standards themselves apply to learning and teaching. And that's perhaps important to bear in mind when I come at the end to the discussions around the revision of the ESG. It's also designed to apply to all higher education. So regardless of the mode of study, and of course this has come into question with the advancements in digital education, online provision, hybrid and blended approaches, the ESG still apply to that. And it also applies regardless of the place of delivery, which comes into play when we talk about transnational education. I think the one other thing I want to highlight here is that the ESG are the standards for quality assurance and not for quality itself. Quite often I get asked, you know, as an opening question, well, what is quality in higher education? How do you define quality? Thinking that an organization such as ENCA must have a definition for that. Sadly, we don't, or perhaps not sadly. I think it's right that we don't have one single definition of quality, but we have standards rather for quality assurance. And the definition of quality needs to be made in each individual context. It's context sensitive, and we normally take as a starting point that education should be fit for purpose. And then there's discussions to be had within institutions about what is the purpose of the education that they provide. Is it around personal development of the students? Is it around ensuring employability? Is it around contributing to broader societal developments? Usually some kind of mix of all that. Finally, just a brief note about the format of the document, in the sense that we have the standards, which are the agreed and accepted practice. And this is what we are looking for when we're evaluating agencies for compliance with the ESG. We're looking at compliance with the standards. We then have under each standard a set of guidelines which give some inspiration as to how the standard might be implemented. It sets out good practice, but it is not the guidelines that are the compliance criteria. So there are other ways of meeting the expectation of the standards. And I think that's important to keep in mind, and sometimes a distinction that gets a little bit lost when we talk about compliance with the ESG. So much for kind of the background and how we've got to where we are today. But there's also been a lot of discussion about the future and where we go from here. Almost since the last version of the ESG was released back in 2015, we were already getting questions about, well, when's the next revision going to be? And obviously, we needed first a period of implementation, of consolidation of this new version. There's no point in changing it too quickly. But the stakeholder organizations in the past year or so have recognized that higher education has been moving quite fast in recent years, probably faster in the past 5 years or so than it has in previous decades, and that there may be reason to bring the ESG more in line with recent developments. But of course, any changes would need to be made on the basis of a really solid evidence base. So for that reason, we've been working on a project called QA Fit for the Future. And we've been doing this with the other stakeholder organizations and a number of national partners. And the aim of this project has really been to map the implementation of quality assurance, both in terms of the ESG, but also beyond that. And to explore the perspectives of different stakeholder groups on the fitness for purpose of the ESG. All of this with a view to eventually making a recommendation towards a new revision of the ESG. We've done the first set of activities as part of this project, which has been a set of surveys to the different stakeholder groups. And what has come out quite clearly from that consultation is that all stakeholders recognise the importance of having a European quality assurance framework. There were no suggestions that we should be ripping up the ESG and everybody should just do what they want, but that they are there for a purpose, and that general purpose is still relevant and is still working. The ESG do support the development of learning and teaching. They do provide the basis for trust in qualifications. They do facilitate student mobility and enhance quality culture. So I think, while it's very easy for us all to get excited talking about what doesn't work and what needs changing, we also need to recognize how far we've come in the past 18 years, and that the tools that we have are solid and are doing the job. But that's not to say that there isn't room for tweaking them. Now, I'm sure the slides can be provided to you afterwards, and the point of this slide is not to go into the data in any level of detail, but rather to illustrate the challenge that we have when we talk about revising the ESG. So in this question in the survey to quality assurance agencies, they were asked if the scope of part 1 should be expanded, what should it cover in more detail? And we asked about various things like research, service to society, digitalization, social dimension. And the point I want to make is that the answers are rather inconclusive. So for every substantial group of agencies that say, yes, we want research to be covered more explicitly in the ESG, there's also a substantial minority that say, no, actually, it doesn't need to be covered. And there's also a large group that kind of sit in the middle and say, yes, we could cover it a bit, but not too much. So all this to say that there isn't any kind of clear-cut expectation that certain things need to be covered in more detail and some things not at all. The other thing that I do want to highlight here is that in another question in this survey, when we asked about what agencies are already doing beyond the scope of the ESG, many of them commented that they already cover many of these issues in their quality assurance frameworks. And this relates back to the principle that the ESG are the baseline standards, but that is not to stop agencies and national frameworks from going beyond the ESG and covering more aspects. So I think many of the answers to this question actually reflect a desire by agencies to bring the European framework closer to what they're actually already doing in practice, rather than to provide a kind of additional impetus for these things to be covered by external quality assurance. So some of the discussions that we will be having going forward. I think we're fairly clear that the purpose of the ESG is working well. But there are discussions around what exactly needs to be regulated and at what level. So the ESG are a European framework. And as I've said, that's not to stop national frameworks and agencies putting additional criteria and additional topics that are relevant in their local context. So not everything has to be regulated in detail at the European level. We also need to ensure that the ESG remain relevant for the diversity of systems that we have. And that comes into account not just in terms of the different approaches to quality assurance, but also in terms of the maturity of the systems. So we have some agencies that have been operating for a very long time, institutions that have been through many rounds of external quality assurance, but we have other systems where this is still under development. And it's important that we give room and flexibility for mature systems to look at different approaches and ensure that their external quality assurance still has added value, even after many cycles. But also that it is still a framework that provides support for developing systems, and that we're not moving the finishing line while people are still running towards it, because that would be unfair, and I'd be very upset with that if I were in that situation. So from this, I think what I want to say is that the revision of the ESG is not going to be a process of ripping it up and starting again. We're not going to radically change the basic principles, and we're not going to radically change what is being covered by the ESG, but rather to tweak it, to bring it up to date into the current context. And this leads me on to mention the scope of the ESG. There are some calls, as I've mentioned, for it to cover research in higher education. But I think it's unlikely that we move into that area, because what we recognise is that there are other frameworks at European and regional level that cover quality assurance of research. And I think it's the role of the ESG rather to make the links and ensure complementarity with those other tools, rather than to in any way duplicate them, or even worse, to contradict them. What I think we are likely to see is strengthened references to more kind of cross-cutting issues. So things like the social dimension of higher education, values of the European higher education area, and applicability to latest developments. So things like the European Universities Initiative, increased internationalization, increased references to applicability to digital and blended learning approaches. And finally, I think there will be a discussion around the structure of the document, not so much the introduction and the 3 parts, but the way that the standards and guidelines are presented and how much detail needs to be in the standard, but also making clear that it is the standard that is the point of compliance and not the guidelines. There have been some discussions, for example, as to whether the guidelines should be presented in a separate document that could be updated more regularly, whereas the standards are more static. I'm not saying that's the direction we will go in, but these are the kind of discussions that we're having. So concretely, what happens next? Over the coming months and into early next year, we will have a further set of activities under the QA Fit project, which will gather further evidence and have further consultation with the stakeholders to explore some of the key questions that I just mentioned. And then what we were expecting is that in the communique for the next ministerial conference, which takes place in Tirana in spring next year, there will be a formal mandate for the authors of the ESG to proceed with a revision process, which will then take place over the next couple of years. So I know it looks like things move very slowly, and sometimes that can be very frustrating, partly to do with the sort of political frameworks that we work in. But I think it's also important that we maintain this principle of a strong stakeholder consultation, and that we ensure that there remains a good ownership and engagement with the ESG. And for that, it's vital that the revision process also takes into account all the stakeholder groups and has a really strong consultation phase. So that's it from me, an overview of how we got to where we are and where we might be going towards. I hope that was in some way interesting and helpful for you, and I look forward to hearing from my colleagues from various agencies in the next part of the conference, and I think they will dive into the different sections of the ESG in a bit more detail. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Anna, for your presentation, giving the audience a brief overview, as well as developments in the ESG, and some clues about the expected enhancement, expected revision of ESG. And let me remind to our participants, audience, that if they have any questions to our speakers, invited speakers, please note them down in the chat section, and then and then our speakers will attend to your questions. Now, if I may ask, you see, considering that only the Higher Education Quality Council is a full member of ENQA, successfully going through the ENQA coordinated review. Now, what would be what are the conditions for the quality assurance agencies, 22 of them, to become affiliate and full member to ENQA? What could be the road to there? Is it too difficult? Is it very challenging? And what could we tell to them? Please, Anna.
I think the starting point would be affiliation with ENQA. So affiliation is open to any bona fide legitimate organization in higher education that has an interest in quality assurance. And I think that's the first step for really being part of and engaging with the European quality assurance community, and engaging with ENQA's activities, which are there to support not just our members but our affiliates, and we work with our affiliates on certain topics very intensively. And you may hear from Robert later today about some of the activities that we did with a certain set of agencies that were on the pathway to ESG compliance, to support them in that journey. But the first thing is really to make sure that you're engaged in the European discussion and familiar with the European framework, and take advantage of the peer learning and exchange opportunities that ENQA provides to all its members and affiliates. And the vast majority of our activities are available both to our members and to our affiliates. So we make sure that we're as inclusive as possible in our events, and add the expertise that we can provide, and the role that we try to play in facilitating peer learning. Now, in terms of the road to full ENQA membership, you asked if it's challenging or hard, and I think I'd be lying if I said that it wasn't. It's not something that you can do from one day to the next. It is a process. And I see a couple of colleagues on screen concurring with this, those that have been through this journey themselves, because the compliance with the ESG is a threshold. It is and it is there for a reason. But I think there's no reason why agencies in Turkey should not be able to be part of that journey, because you have a framework already that is aligned with the ESG, because the national level agency is already a member of ours. So the conditions are good for that, but it's something that, yes, that does require work, both in terms of looking at your own standards that you use to evaluate programs, but also your own operations in terms of internal quality assurance at the agencies, independence, the consistency and the transparency of your processes, all things which are key to compliance with the ESG. But I would encourage any agency that is interested in starting on this journey to get in touch with us and really to engage with our activities, because you learn a lot from hearing what colleagues across Europe are doing. Of course, every agency is working in a different context. You can't sort of just copy paste what one agency is doing and put it in your own agency and expect it to work in your own context. But when you hear about what colleagues and organizations across Europe are doing, you pick up on, one or two things from that country that may work in your country, and one or two things from that agency that may work in your agency, and take home those lessons and adapt them and apply them to your own context. So I think the engagement with the broader European community is really important in this regard.
Okay. Anna, thank you very much for your explanations. And if you would send us any link related with your presentation and the way to become a member or an affiliate to ENQA, we will share that with our members and the audience of this conference. So I'd like to thank you very much for your contributions now. And I would like to move to Diana Freiberger. She's going to give us an overview of the European Standards and Guidelines, Part 1. And the Part 1 involves the standards and guidelines for internal quality assurance. It is more relevant to the universities. However, the quality assurance agencies must have their standards consistent with the internal quality assurance guidelines of the ESG. So in this respect, this section is much more important to the universities as well as to the quality assurance agencies. Now, very briefly, Diana Freiberger she's the managing director of FIBA, and before that, she served as the vice rector of an Austrian university for 4.5 years, and her responsibility was the quality assurance issues, and her presence in the higher education area is more than 20 years. And she also worked at the Austrian Quality Assurance Agency, where she carried out national and international institutional evaluations in various countries, including Russia, Kazakhstan, Italy, and Tehran. So that I'm sure that we will benefit from her presentation quite a lot. And without delaying any further, I would like to give the floor to Diana. Please, Diana.
Thank you so much, Hassan, for the introducing words. Hello, everyone. Normally from Bonn, Germany, but at that time during a business trip from Doha. Yes, so I also want to share the presentation, my presentation with you. As Hassan pointed out, I will go a little bit deeper to the ESG one, and yes, and yes, in case that not long ago I also was on, let me say, the other side, so I still remember what is the challenge for higher education institutions to get their own standards, and then yes, to get ready for being accredited institutional or in program wise. So yes, nice to meet you. I want to start with first a short introduction about FIBA. Then we go to the standard one, and this is, I matched our assessment guide with the standards, and I want to give you some insights as I had experience from my time in higher education. And after this, I am very happy to get your questions. So let me give a short introduction about FIBA. So FIBA stands for Foundation for International Business Administration and Accreditation. So we are quality assurance accreditation, a quality assurance agency with, yes, a long tradition. So next year we have our 30th anniversary. And we were established 1994 by the employers associations and chambers from Germany, Switzerland, and Austria. So our foundation headquarters is in Switzerland, in Zurich, and our head office is in Bonn. So yes, as Anna mentioned, we are one of this agency who had a lot of procedure with ENQA, and yes, all the time when we have these procedures, we can develop a step further and we can learn by ourselves and can, yes, I will say, practice quality enhancement. And this, I think, is the most important in my understanding. And I always, when I'm talking to higher education institutions, I always also talk to them. So this means that we are also in the register, in the ECA, and we have several cooperations in different countries. And yeah, we also accredited in Kazakhstan, and we are listed in several countries. You also get my presentation, and if someone is interested in deeper, so he can look it up. So we are really an international accreditation agency, so we have a lot of procedures, international and yes, also national. So these are the product portfolio from FIBA. So sure, we have program accreditation and institutional accreditation. We also have certification of advanced accreditation, and we are at that time, yes, we are just our assessment guide for this product in and dealing with micro-credentials. And we also have FIBA Consult. What is a USP or something special by FIBA? So if you go through a FIBA procedure, you can fulfill the standards. They are based on the ESG, and yes, and then you get the FIBA seals. But what we recognize that some universities in some areas, they have some special things, say they've developed some special procedures or something. So we have, yes, it is a complex formula behind. So if one higher education institution exceeded in a special amount of criteria we have in our assessment guide, they can get the FIBA premium seal for this. It is, I think, in a year, 3 to 4 times we, our accreditation commission give the FIBA premium seal. What we also have in our portfolio is the FIBA seal for excellence in digital education. We developed this since we started, yes, 2020, and then we developed with several stakeholders, especially in Germany. Since 2021, we had some pilot higher education institutions, and since 2022, we are on the market with this seal. We have some of 3 to 4 procedures the year. At the whole, we now have 12 higher education institutions. We offer the seal for program and also for institutional. And what does this seal means in a nutshell? It certifies and it looks on the digital learning and teaching environment. And for this seal, yes, we have since the February 2022, we have the European trademark. So this was in a nutshell FIBA, and now we go to ESG part 1. So Anna gave an overview of the 3 parts of the ESG. I was thinking about this and I tried to give an overview, and as I said, I go a little bit in details, which means I listed the criteria behind. So as we have heard, ESG part 1 is the standards from 1 to 10. This is where the higher education institution and the university, yes, should go along and should be compliant with this and should find their internal quality assurance aspects to fulfill these standards and to make sure that they do the quality assurance in the high. Then the part 2, this is what the procedure, how the quality agencies will look at the universities and the higher education institutions, how they fulfill the things. And yes, part 3 is the things, the standards, what the quality agency were tested, whether they are compliant with part 2 and compliant that they look in the right way to part 1, or they recognized all the standards in part 1. So I tried to give you this overview. Yes, it is important because all the standards you cannot take one as a higher education institution. You cannot take only one part. You have to know 3 parts, and also, sure, for a quality agency, you always have to have in mind the 3 parts. So this is, yes, the next slide. It tries to explain in words, but I did it in this graphic. So now we try to go in details of the standards. So you have the policy and the quality assurance in standard 1 for higher education institutions. So when I match it to our assessment guide, when we look to this quality assurance, to this standard 1, it is in our assessment guide, it is in the part 5, when we look to the quality assurance strategy, when we look to the processes, to the outcome, and to the instruments. And we have heard it from Anna before. So in these standards, the higher education institution makes the definition of their understanding of quality assurance. So I think it is always a thing that one, as an organization or as an institution, makes so much quality assurance instruments, processes, and as necessary, or you can also exceed and can say, I will focus on a special area, and this is because it has to match with my policy as higher education institution. So if you want an example, if I say I am the university and my special trend or my strategy, my goals are now to fulfill that I am excellence in all the digitalization. So you have to have, or you should put all the things after this navigation goal, this goal you gave yourself, and as you should bring your standards behind that. Nevertheless, you have the 10 standards which you have to fulfill. But in the standard 1, there you gave yourself what is important for your higher education institution, for your universities. And this, because we also do program accreditation and institutional accreditation. So when you are looking to your design of the program, it also has to match to your overall strategy, which means the objectives. We check the objectives, we say match to the overall strategy. We also check the structure and your cooperation partners, the quality assurance, and the external evaluation by the alumni. And so these criteria match it with the design and the approval of the programs, which I want to point out is, so if you design your programs, so you are subject oriented, sure, for sure this, but even if you are subject oriented, you should put it under your whole quality assurance understanding and should adjust your instruments, which means especially for international procedures. So if you want your program to be an international programs, this is normally the reasons that you decide, okay, we also want an international accreditation. So this is what often universities, when they come to us and we were talking to them, and then we are asking them, even if they come from the Asian part or from whatever, then we say, okay, what is your purpose, why you want an international accreditation? Because when we do our accreditation, we are based on the ESG. What is your goal, why you want this? So in designing your program, I think it is always important that you have your objectives, the subject-oriented objective, but you also have your goals and the objectives, what you have to, your overall strategy. Though the standard 3 is the student-centered learning and teaching and assessment. Sure, there are some criteria in our assessment guide which match to this. What we are looking when we are looking to the student-centered learning, the teaching and the assessment, I always say, if you have a program accreditation, these, for my side, being in university a long time, it is the heart of the program, because you have your objectives, subject-oriented and so on, but in this you have your didactical concept. This means how you gave all the content to your students, how you, when you do the teaching, and how you have in mind that your students, when they going out, are fit for the future, how you teach them to solve the problems, the subject-oriented problems, and what you are offer them. You are offer them the point that they can have also an international, go out and have an international master degree, or what competences you gave to them, what skills, especially for employment. So as you all know, yes, our business world, the whole working world is changing. And I think this, in every accreditation or when you prepare your study programs, it is a very crucial point at that time to look to the working world and to look to the how can the alumni be employed and where they are, and is the program already designed that they are fit for the future. And therefore, it is always in this standard important that you get the feedback from your students, because we have heard about the diversity and how ESG in future will look to the diverse aspects. I think, yes, in the last 10 years, the diversity of the education biographies of students, yes, has changed. There are not the standard students which come with a diploma from and an assessment to the university and a diploma from the school to be allowed to study, though they come from different educational background, with different educational backgrounds and with a lot of different, yes, but educational biographies. And therefore, I think it is a very important part. And this is one instrument normally, and which is you use as a quality assurance instrument, but it is only one of them. So when you do your standards, when you try to fulfill your standards, evaluation of students, evaluation by students is only one. So yes, I think this is a very, and you see, you have in these standards, you have to consider very multi-perspective stakeholders and also approaches. So how you try to fulfill this standard as the high quality as you defined it for your higher education institution. Then, yes, the standard 4 is the student admission and progression and recognition and certification. So this is, yes, as we all know, every higher education institution, every university, they are in charge what students they want and what kind of students. But what is very important in this standard is that you make it you make sure that there is a transparency. So which means that every student who is interested in your university and you're getting in your study program know exactly what to do and what documents she has to bring in, and then she also knows what she has to fulfill, that she can do her own progress, she can do the progress, and what kind of certification she becomes for this. So I think in this thing, it is transparency of all, yes, your internal guidelines you gave to your stakeholder, in this case to your students, and yes, and how you handle your core process in the university, which is teaching and learning. Then the next standard is the stuff, the teaching stuff. Yes, in this, you also normally you have your regulations which are made by the Higher Education Act. So what competences the staff, the professors have to have, and also your university will have regulations, especially, for example, you have special research topics. So you will try to find the professors, but also you will look at the didactical qualification of the professors, because yes, so as I mentioned, the core process is teaching and learning in your university. Although you want to find the best professors, they can provide this teaching and learning. Sure, the one is the research, but you always have to make sure that the transfer of the teaching and learning is, yes, they can do it. And this is also what I mentioned before. So if your goal, your overall goal, for example, is I want to do more digitalization in my university, or especially in advanced education. So you have to look that you get the staff and the faculty and the professors, but you also have to make sure that you train them how to do, because what I told, the environment is changing, teaching is changing. So it does not help if you say, okay, we will do this and this will be our new policy and our new goal. So when we look at this, we also check how you make sure that your faculty get the further development for teaching and for doing the research. For example, how they are supported if they do research papers, especially how young professors are supported to do their research. What processes you have in your higher education institution and what guidelines you have there. Yes, so this is what we are looking in this standard. Then we have the learning resources and the student support. Yeah, this is the learning resources. Normally you look at the library, or in former time, you look at the equipment of the higher education institutions and but also if we think about your goal and your approach is to strengthen diversity, so we also look what is the resources for this goal and what is the university do for this. Or when we're talking about digitalization, what do the resources, the university offer resources for doing a good online education? Are there license for online libraries and so on and so on? Though, yes, the standard 6 there is where the university, yes, always the same, should look at the approach they want and then support the students and the staff and everyone to enable them to do like the strategy and the navigation of the university tell them. Then we have the 7, this is standard, is the information management. The information management, this also has to do with transparency, and it is the general informations, how you develop your program. We will look how you put the stakeholders inside, and yes, what information and activities you have during the whole year, that every stakeholder, the students, the staff, your corporations have the information what's going on and what you want them, that they support you, that they do for you, and how the students that they can be enabled to do the best results at the end. And then we also have the public information. This, this is the standard 8. So this is how, you do your program description, you do your module catalog, and you do all the things. This also fits for the standard 3. So we want to make sure, or you as a higher education institution should make sure that your module catalog is designed, and not only designed, the wording is competence oriented and it is outcome based. So you show not what you teach everyone and what you do, the point is what they are able to do after this. So, and this should be transparent on for public and especially for your students, because when the students look to your programs, yes, then they should have the best information that they can get an insight what they, after the study programs, are able to do. And sure, also and transparency information during the whole academic year, what your rules are and so on. And then it is about the ongoing monitoring, about your programs, about your processes. Let me see your processes, because you should have your processes, the core processes. This is the main thing where you earn the money. Then the management processes. This is where you create or you manage all your main things, your core processes, and then you have the support processes. And yes, as it is always, and I think it's very important for university, always you have your continuous improvement for this, which means, let me say, you are able to look to your routines in the university, to look to your routines, and you are able to question them, which means when we have the Plan, Do, Check Act, where is the gap between the plan and the between plan and do? And when I check it, where is my gap? Where I have to get adjusted, where I have to develop further on. And yes, and this is where we look at this time. And also, yeah, we look at the external quality assurance. What are the universities doing beside accreditation? How they put stakeholders in when they develop their own programs, how they put the business, for example, the business in, and take in feedback from other stakeholders outside of the university, not only inside, the professors, maybe the other faculties. And yes, and some agencies has some special seals, maybe special seals for sustainability or special seal for family friendly or something like this. Yes, so I think running a little bit over time. So this was, even because you see it is a very complex thing, it was a short overview, and whenever you have questions, feel free to contact me. Even you have the question not now, so you also can contact me by email or by phone or whatever. And now I'm looking forward to your question. Thank you so much.
Okay. Nayan, thank you very much for keeping the time there, because when we look at part one has got 10 headings, so that we might have been given, we should have been giving you a little bit more time, but thank you very much for summarizing part one, the internal quality assurance for the universities. And what I had seen there is that you have done a consistency analysis. It's just that FEMA is both carrying out institutional accreditation as well as program accreditation. And while you do that, the standards and criteria that you have carried, that you are using, is actually consistent with the standards and the criteria of the European Standards and Guidelines Part 1. And that is a very good example. And it is very important for the quality assurance agencies in Turkey, 22 of them, to carry out a similar consistency analysis. I think that is very beneficial for our quality assurance agencies. So I would like to thank you very much for that very important and very timely presentation. Now, with one thing to our audience, we will be providing you the links and the relevant information. Very simple. If you have info@FEMA or info@ENQA, your emails will go to, and if you address them to our speakers, it will go to them directly as well. And with their permission, we will try to present you their PowerPoints at the STAR web page. And that will depend on the permission that we will get from our invited speakers. Now, I should move on before losing time and also taking your time. Our next speaker is Iring Wasser, and he will be talking on the part 2 of the European Standards and Guidelines, and that is the external quality assurance. Iring Wasser is a very good friend of mine since 2010, when I was the president of YÖDAK, Quality Assurance Agency. By then, so early, we had invited quality assurance agencies to Cyprus first, MÜDEK, FEDEK, and MEAG. But we also invited FEMA, ASIN, AKAS, and AHPGS, so that they are all our good friends, and Iring Wasser is one of them. He's very active. He was the president of CIENQA, Central and Eastern Quality Assurance Agencies, when I was also a member of CIENQA. So I had the chance to know him and to work with him. He's very efficient, very knowledgeable, and I have no doubt that his presentation will add value to our conference. Now, I would like to leave the floor to Iring Wasser, and the floor is his. Okay, Iring?
Yeah, thanks, Hassan. Just to double check, you can hear me and can you see my presentation?
Yes,
already?
I can see you up in the line as well as your presentation as well. So the floor is yours, Iring.
Then thanks very much, Hassan. It's a pleasure to see all of you. I see a lot of colleagues I know personally. Indeed, I've prepared a presentation about how to interpret and use the ESG part 2. I only have following the example of Diana, I have 2 slides where I quickly tell you a little bit about ASIN, only 2 of them, and then I will move directly into medias res. You see here our activities. We are probably one of the most international of all agencies, accrediting in 62 countries. And we do that because in most of these countries, we have over the past 20 years built capacity, or we have built up quality assurance systems, frequently with the support of, for example, the German Academic Exchange Council or the World Bank and others. In terms of what we do, it's a broad range. The portfolio is quite broad. Of course, we do international program accreditation, especially in the STEM areas. That is like engineering, informatics, all the natural sciences, business, and medicine. We have developed 2 types of institutional accreditation. One which I'm very proud of, which is the ASIN institutional maturity model, which is ideally suited for international benchmarking exercises. I do believe it's a unique model for measuring institutional maturity. That is something which is very exciting. When you now move to the other side, the ASIN consulting branch, as most of you, we are now dealing with the certification of continuous academic education, lifelong learning. I've come to the conclusion that doing this on the module level is not very successful. So I think we all have to move to like the institutional certification of providers in lifelong learning. We also do, and that's somehow connected to what I'm presenting, we have been serving as coordinating institution for EQR listings. And that means that logically, I and my workers have to be knowledgeable about the ESG, because when you do that, you have to apply the ESG point in number 2 and 3. We do a lot of consulting, trainings, and workshops on ESG, workshops on peer training. There's some other services like individual professional cards. Have a look at our website. You will see a richness of different things. I would like to mention, for some reason, this disappeared in my slide. We are constantly offering international conferences. And if you are interested, and that's then finishing the part of Azin, if you are interested in the topic of artificial intelligence, we have invited and we have prepared a great program with all stakeholders on the 30th of November, 1st of December in Potsdam, close to Berlin. That is like the conference, international global conference on artificial intelligence in higher education. And there will be another conference on the 14th and 15th of December talking about the future of European informatics. And in this program, you will see every single stakeholder represented by their presidents. It's for the first time, I would say, perhaps even in history, that we managed to bring together all the leading figures of informatics, including the persons of the so-called Seoul Accord, which is representing the Anglo-Saxon, Australian, American, Canadian informatics people. So that's for Azin, and all the dates and everything you'll find on our website. I would like to mention that Azin, in the year 2011, my office, we founded an important organization which is called the European Alliance of Professional and Subject-Specific Accreditation, EASPA. I was the founding president for 6 years, and here you will see a broad range, no longer of national actors, but of international higher education quality assurance networks in the disciplines. And I mentioned this because the Turkish agencies, 22 of them, which are very much in the field of the different disciplines, like MÜDEC in the field of engineering. There's a new one in the area of forestry, for example. You will find your complementary European networks in this slide. Here you see, just like to quickly mention that, you see the Alliance of Medical Schools in Europe. You see the Network for Informatics Education, the European Countries Biology Associations. ADD are the dentists. You will have also, like, apart from the aerospace engineers, music, arts. So this is, so to speak, the nucleus of international bodies which are engaged in professional accreditation. And now comes the important part, based on agreed cross-national learning outcomes. So all of these networks have defined their learning outcomes, and these networks also are checking not only the intended learning outcomes, but the achieved learning outcomes. And it's a rich resource also for Turkish agencies. If you're looking for standards, if you're looking for experts, these are the organizations you might address it to. So that was like my short introductory remarks. Now coming more to the topic at hand. I think Europe has been doing good in what has been established. I'm not going to mention any of these. You just read that, but I'm simply saying I think the Bologna process is a success story, because most of the elements which you need to run such a continental organization is there. The currency, the credits, the diploma supplements. We do have the recognition convention, the Lisbon for Europe recently, or a year ago, the UNESCO Global Recognition Convention. We have the DQR, the database, which I consider a very important tool. DQR is very important. For us as an agency which is close to the profession, the directive on the recognition of professional qualifications play a big role. You have the criteria of the frameworks. I like the Salzburg criteria for doctoral schools, and we have our own Azin criteria for PhD programs. I mentioned EASPA, this European Alliance for Professional Accreditation, which is providing, next to the ministerial the Dublin descriptors, the criteria for bachelor and master in the different disciplines, learning outcomes, competence profiles for all the disciplines I've mentioned. What is missing a little bit? What are we working on? Anna was referring to that. We all are wrestling as agency with the quality assurance of micro-credentials, which is, so to speak, some sort of like a fifth European framework. We all have not solved the problem of how to quality assure the new type of European universities. Around 50 of those have been participating in conferences, and nobody has really like a good solution right now. There will be the European degrees in the future, potentially, which is also a challenge. I do see a need for a further expansion of the DQR database of the ministers and relating them to other continental databases, for example, in Asia. I think that what has been developed by IASPA, these cross-national, international learning outcomes, that they should be used also by other agencies. I'm currently dealing with requests for developing professional cards on the student and on the graduate level. So in a way, getting some sort of a passport for students who can move freely in Europe. And of course, the revision of European standard and guidelines. Anna has explained all of that. I think it's a great piece of document, to tell the truth. It's all interconnected. It's like the American Constitution. It's not a big document, but the essentials are there and they are nicely linked to each other. I think Anna mentioned in her introductory speech that always the first criterion actually is relating to the preceding one. That means when you look at part 2, consideration 2.1, consideration of internal quality assurance, it all relates to the 10 criteria of part 1. And when you look to the first criterion on part 3, where it talks about activities, policy and processes for quality assurance, whoever is reviewing the agencies has to actually check whether the agency is fulfilling all the criteria of part 2. So it's interconnected. If you ask me, there is potential for revision, especially of the of the part 1 standard and guidelines, which were presented by Diana, because if you look at those criteria, I would argue that 1.2 and 1.9 already belong together. You have like the student life cycle, which is 1.3, 1.4, and 1.5, also 1.6. So that is the central part of the student life cycle, admission, examination, and all of that teaching philosophy. And I would argue, colleagues, that we can get rid of 1.1, policy for quality assurance. We can get rid of 1.7 and 1.8. Because in my agency, we have integrated these 3 criteria, so the quality assurance aspect, the public information aspect, and the information management, as integral part of the other criteria. So in other words, to close the PDCA cycle, so as good as they are, as good, and I like the ESG, I think there's room for improvement in a way to merge some of the overarching criteria in the central other criteria. Standards, as I mentioned, 2.1, that's an easy one. We're talking now about what agencies need to observe, colleagues, what agencies like yours need to observe when they are doing external quality assurance of universities. You, in a way, have to check in your accreditation procedures that the university is adequately looking at the 10 criteria of ESG.1. No more and no less, that's the content of 2.1. 2.2, I never quite understood, to tell you the truth. If you read the standard, it's quite complicated. What I understand is stakeholders should be involved in its design and continuous improvement. Actually, what is fascinating is that all of the standards talk about a should, and that's because the ministers are careful and the ESG are not binding. But I think you can forget about the should, because the standard should say, no, external quality assurance is defined and designed. Why should? No, that's a standard. A standard should not say should. But again, the first part is difficult to understand, but it gets easier if you look at the guidelines, which are always like the interpretation of the standard. And it's interesting what it says. And I wonder how many of our agencies are really fully complying with this. Because it says here, we as agencies should keep the level of workload and cost of higher education agencies, I would say, low, or proportionally. So we in a way should organize our work in a way that we do not put too much administrative and financial burden on our clients. If you ask now the universities what they think of that, they probably would say, no, in most agencies, these guys are really, they don't like to sit on the other side of the table. But that's the challenge, to organize, on the one hand, our procedures in an efficient and low-cost way, while at the same time guaranteeing the quality and not doing like some sort of a shortcut accreditation. We are supposed to, in a way, support higher education institutions to improve the quality, not so much being the control agency, but more supporting them. Hard to say, Azin, and I would say you doing the same thing. We are trying to find out whether we are good in the first 2 points by sending a questionnaire to the reviewed program and institution, and we're asking them, did the Azin procedure support you improving quality, or did we hinder you? And we also are looking, talking to them about workload and these things. So this is like the challenge, that you organize your work in a way that it's not a burden to institutions. 2.3. That's not a very difficult one. We are supposed as agencies to implement processes, and the core processes are the same all around the world. And colleagues, I never quite understood, to tell you the truth, why it has come across that on a global level, we all jointly seem to think that writing a self-assessment report, doing a visit by experts, sending experts to a university, and then writing an accreditation report and perhaps have a follow-up action, that is, so to speak, the unique way of doing things. It's my impression that this is like a unique model, and that too little thought is invested in whether there are alternative ways of doing accreditation procedures. But again, these are the core elements, and you will find them on the Fiji Islands, in the United States, and in Europe. That is the agreement of everybody who seems to say this is like the most efficient way of, in a way, checking the quality assurance of programs and institutions. 2.4 relates to experts. The standard is short. It says external quality assurance. Let's say in Turkey, they carry out procedures by groups of external experts that include student members. I think that's a strange way of putting things, because here you see the impact of ESU, the European Student Union, because of all the stakeholders. Somehow the students found it important to mention that external quality assurance should include student members. All the others are not mentioned. So that seemed to be an important topic, and perhaps is a signal that back then, 2015, there was a need to somehow still include this into the standard. The guidelines, the interpretation, I quickly summarize them here. You're supposed to compile an expert team with various perspectives, and here all of them are cited now. That's academics, students, and employers. There's an argument, especially in front of the German Constitutional Court, who says, if you're compiling a group, it's okay if all these groups are, all these different stakeholders are included, but we would appreciate, or we see a need, that the academics have a majority in those groups. That's the ruling of the highest institutional court. It's important that you, in a way, experts are important. So you, in a way, should have suitable means of training them, selecting them, training them, and getting a feedback. Again, if I look at my own agency, at the end of each procedure, I've been doing visits in countless countries, colleagues, and I'm highly critical of the way, when I'm observing visits, I'm critical of the way I witness that experts are asked. Even the exercise of asking questions is a difficult one. I'm critical concerning the summary which is given at the exit interview. So this is tough job. You need well-trained persons. Doesn't matter whether they are professors or not, they need to be trained. They need to be trained also in the interpretation of the criteria. And in my agency, at the end of each audit, we are sending a questionnaire to the reviewed program and institution, and we are asking them about the performance of the experts, making sure that we are not using experts which are not up to the task. Of course, they have to be independent. You all know that. And it's important to have international experts. When Asin is accrediting in 62 countries, we as a rule include experts from the country where we accredit. I never understood that. Was just like in Kosovo, for example. And Kosovo, in a way, as being a small country, it has like always has international experts. And the Kosovo agency, KAA, is flying in an international student to actually evaluate programs in Kosovo. And give me an idea why a German student would be more suitable than a student from Kosovo who knows the living conditions and who knows the environment. Why you would not use a student from Kosovo? And the same applies to the expert from industry. You usually should be from the country where a university is operating, because they know about the market and the employment conditions. 2.5, for me, that is the most critical. I've been building up agencies in many, many countries, and this has always been and is the most crucial part. It says, the standard says that when Turkish agencies are actually making a decision, it should be placed on explicit and published criteria. So far, so good. Usually you do have your criteria. Now, then the last point is more difficult, that are applied consistently. And this consistent application, that is the challenge. How can you, in a way, guarantee that if you are accrediting in many countries, many different programs, given the imponderabilities of different groups of experts, how can you make sure that 2 or 3 groups of experts are reaching more or less comparable results? If I had more time, I would tell you about an extensive way of checks and balances we are employing in our own Asin institution, where we have like 3 levels of decision making. The experts, we have technical committees who are reviewing, for example, all the medical decisions in different countries, and we have an accreditation commission, and we hope that at the end of the day, we're having a database of all of our recommendations and requirements we're using. And so that even in the wording, there has to be consistency in how you, in a way, formulate a requirement or recommendation. That's the challenge. And I don't know many agencies which are doing a good job in consistently having a living memory of the many accreditations they have done over the years. 2.6, coming to a close. Hassan, in case you're nervous, reporting, that is the standard is easy. Full reports by the experts, forget about the should, are published, they are clear and accessible. And again, the guidelines then will give you the interpretation. I can see, for example, with our colleagues from ABIT, we have like the American agencies, they don't publish the report. So that's a European standard. I think it's good. I think it's good that like the positive reports as well as the negative reports must be published. If the negative are not published, the whole idea of having a whitelist is not well. The difficult part is I would say the writing of the report. Asin is offering workshops which are desperately needed in a way to train experts in writing reports. We even have given up the idea, colleagues, that the experts can write good reports themselves. We have professionalized the service, so it's my own people who are writing every single report. I've been working for the Australian quality assurance agencies, where one person is employed for doing nothing else but actually proofreading all the reports which are going to be published, in terms of consistency, in terms of logical reasoning, in distinguishing between the descriptive and the deciding part. Writing reports tell you when I'm actually, Azin, before we are giving employment to someone, the person has to do some sort of like a trial. If I actually put 20 PhD students who have been living and working in universities for 10, 15 years at the age of 35, out of 20, you test 25% are capable of writing a report, accreditation report, which is up to the level. And I'm skeptical whether if you compile experts and they with different things are putting together a report, whether that's a proof of consistency. Think of the other report, other criteria I was just speaking about. Last one is complaints and appeals. It's important to understand the difference between the complaints and appeals. The appeals are directed at insufficient evidence of outcomes, or if the reviewed university thinks that the criteria have been handed improperly, or that something has in a way been inconsistent. Whereas so that appeals is directed towards the process and the decision, whereas complaints is rather like it's a lower level. It's on a lower level where you in a way can complain that, I don't know, the time management was not good, but you in a way you have to have like procedures for both. On your websites you clearly need to describe how a university can complain and how it can appeal. The appeal is more important, and you need to, in a way, that's also a challenge, establish an appeals committee which is independent. In the case of my own organization, we have in a way put together an appeals committee where I even ask the managing directors of competing agencies to in a way review it if a university says an Azin decision has not been fair or has been incorrect. So putting together an independent, out of the decision-making body, an appeals committee is of high relevance. And this, Hassan, completes my short presentation. Hope it has been useful. I've been now, Diana is doing part one. I've been doing part two related to quality assurance, and Ronnie now is actually talking about the agencies. So you're getting the complete picture. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay. Irving, I thank you very much because you kept your presentation in time, and that gives us more flexibility as we go. Now that I have seen that you have raised quite a number of critique to the European standards and guidelines, and maybe if we are to organize another conference, we may have Asin and Enqua discussing those issues. And I expect that such a webinar will attract more audience, more spectators than having Galatasaray playing Manchester United in Istanbul. So we will look forward to that, Irene. Now, let me ask, I'm asking one question to each participant, and actually this question I had posed you when we were together in Astana. Now, most of the quality assurance agencies in Turkey, they are using this program-specific criteria. Now, you have program accreditation, so that in the program accreditation, you already have program learning outcomes that you look at whether they are consistent with the program goals. Now, what is this program? What is this program-specific criteria? And does it apply to other disciplines other than engineering, other than ESPA, your professional and subject-specific criteria?
It's a very important question, and it brings me back to my days when I started in 2001. And it's amazing how life is changing. I used to be a managing director at a time when the idea of learning outcomes and applying learning outcomes was a no-go. You know, Azin has been wrestling and had like law suits with the Accreditation Council, because the idea was always like there are expert groups who by themselves will know what to do. The European Commission has thought differently, because already back in the 1990s, it financed the so-called tuning, and it has become now the Tuning Academy, which consisted of global networks, colleagues of universities which came together and were talking on the disciplinary level of what to expect from a program and what profiles there should be. And then in history, after tuning in the 1990s, there were accreditation agencies like FIBA, like Azin and others, who were taking over these learning outcomes produced by the higher education establishment and put them into like work for the purpose of accreditation. The next step was then that these European international networks actually came together, and Azin is the nucleus. That was the foundation of the European Alliance for Professional Accreditation. At the time, back in 2011, this was created. Me as a founding president, I very quickly talked to the only other body which is globally, which is the American Alliance of Professional Accreditation, consisting of 70 agencies, and we are talking now among the two agencies about like these global learning outcomes. There's also like this attempt, I've been trying this without much success, for Asia to do the same thing. So in other words, there are these learning outcomes which can be used by anybody, by any agency. You don't have to be a part of the EASPA network. So Turkish agencies can use it, but this alone is not sufficient. Because if you use them, I think we as agencies, when we are making an accreditation decision, it's about the achieved learning outcomes. It's when you are an accreditor, you will find that there are all universities are saying we are giving a perfect service to our students and we are the best. But it's important to have a close look at the student learning, at the student outcome. That you have a look at the project work, at some like the final thesis, bachelor master thesis. In some areas, you go one step further, Hasan. I'm now talking to the medical sector, which is doing so-called progress tests. So there are international networks of professors who in a way are providing a service outside the accreditation agencies. They are sending a test to universities, and 15 faculties in Germany are doing this. And here they are in a way giving these progress tests to student cohorts to really check where students have reached from an international benchmarking perspective, how far have they come in actually being a doctor and so on. So you can see there's a PDCA cycle, there's a new world. And I think that's the reason why I'm insisting that looking at achieved learning outcomes from the point of accreditation agency is key. A long answer, but a long answer to a very important question. I think we all should move along this way. Huh? To why? Because that's the only way to actually organize academic and professional mobility in the future with a higher education community, which is becoming more and more diverse. Full stop.
Okay, thank you very much, Iring. Next time we meet, we will take it from there onwards. So thank you very much. Now, I have to move on so that we are running ahead of time. And first of all, I would like to thank to Managing Director of ACAS, Doris Herman. She accepted to participate, but because her other commitments, she's not with us. And this has been decided previously. And instead of her, we have the Deputy Director of ACAS, Rooney Hines, another long-term friend since 2010. He had been visiting us in North Cyprus when I was the president of YÖDAK, and this continued since then. So Rooney is, it's just that he is in this quality assurance business for 12 years. And since then, he had done 150 accreditations reviews, both inside and outside Germany. When we say outside Germany, not only in Europe, but in Asia, Asian countries, Gulf countries, and South America are in these countries. So, and he's also a board member of European consortium of accreditation. And this European consortium accreditations is mainly involved in internationalization, and they have developed a specific criteria in order to assess the level of internationalization. And I had invited them to Cyprus twice as well. Now, apart from that, when I looked at his CV, Rooney is also an international consultant to YÖKAK, so that he is in Turkey quite often. And one other thing is there, it's his second term in the ENQA Agency Review Committee, where I think they are going over the reports and trying to assess the consistency of the report. I'm sure he will mention in his speech all of these issues as well. So I would like to leave the floor to Rooney. Okay, Rooney, the floor is yours. You can
Perfect.
share your PowerPoints with us as well.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Hassan. Thank you for this very nice introduction. So this is always interesting to know what is interesting for the audience. Yeah, welcome also from my side, and thank you for inviting me. Günaydın, and recognizing that from the participants list, it seems that we also have some participants over from Romania. So bună dimineața. A pleasure to have you here. I'll start sharing my slides so that we can get started, because I do respect you all already a lot for your ability to be such precise listeners for such a long time. I will talk maybe 1 minute to keep it very short about the background that shapes how I look at ESG part 3, and then clearly focus a little bit on the core that is part 3 of the ESG. For those of you who have a background on an institutional level, this might be an interesting exercise, because it basically also tells you that agencies who you work with or have to work with are not totally free in what they do and how they act. But there are regulations on how agencies should be structured, how their work has to be done, and what are the rules and regulations for that. So I hope that you can see the screen as I do. So maybe 2 words about Aquas, the agency that I work for. We are a German accreditation agency. We do indeed also operate in Turkey. We are the largest accreditor in Germany. In the past 20 years, we have accredited more than 8,000 programs, but also institutions in the different countries that Hassan already mentioned. And our approach is very much an enhancement-oriented one that is also reflected in what the colleagues already explained, particularly in ESG part 1. It's enhancement-oriented approach that is reflected in the ESG. We take it as a partnership for quality approach. That basically also means we do look at programs and respect that the responsibility of running a good quality program comes from the institution. And that also means that we fully respect the diversity that the ESG allow, because the same amount of diversity that we see in institutions in the different systems that they operate in, because they're usually based in very different cultures, and that also leads to different quality cultures. That approach is also true for agencies, actually. So my own agency, Aquas, we were reviewed against the ESG 3 times, 2 times under the 2015 version, so under the current version. But what will shape a little bit my perspective of what I'm telling you in the next, and I will try to keep it short and not talk longer than 15-20 minutes max, is more shaped by the fact that myself, I'm also an agency reviewer for ENQA, also for INQUA, but here the focus clearly is ENQA. That means that like I do visit other agencies and am part of the review against the ESG. And as Hassan also mentioned, ENQA has invested a lot in increasing the quality of the agency reviews and assuring consistency as requested. I mean, Iring just said that consistency, consistent application criteria for outcomes is highly relevant. So ENQA has established that agency review committee reading all the reports coming out of the ENQA reviews. And that basically means in the last, it's my second term there now. So in the last 3.5 years since inception, I would rather say I've read some 50 reports on agencies across the time. That was it's very interesting, and again it shows that no agency is exactly as the other, and that is very good because the reasons and the backgrounds of agencies are very different. There are different ways how we all can do the same things, how we can implement the same standards and guidelines, but do that based on our own culture, on our own background, and the setup that is really different for every institution. I will not talk about this because it's really interesting to see, starting from Anna. I think this is a slide that the one way or the other you could see with the colleagues as well. What matters is that and this is really interesting on what I'm talking about now, is the inner logic of the ESG means you have part one oriented to the institution, you have part two oriented to the procedure, an external quality assurance procedure, and then part three looking at the agency itself. When there is a review of an agency, the dynamic is exactly the other way around. So the reports start addressing 3.1. And only after addressing part number 3, they start dealing with part number 2, because there is always that reference to the part before. So what are the standards in part 3 of the ESG? And there are 7 of one, and I can be very, very short on 2 of them. Because they are usually not overly challenged, but they are very, very relevant to also be looked at, because there is an inner logic in these standard. And so the way that one of the standard is fulfilled very often has an impact on the way another standard then can be read or should be interpreted. So we have 7 standards to look at. I will focus a little bit less on 3.2 and 3.7, and 3.1 is already a standard that has the most text actually. It has the most text as well in the standard as also in the guidelines, but in that standard that looks at the policy and the processes for quality assurance, mainly the thing to look at is the fact that there should be regular activities as implemented following part 2 of the ESG. And that is a very interesting debate that you sometimes have, because you have agencies and you have systems in which there is a division of tasks, in which agencies do one part of the job and another institution, sometimes that's even the ministries, or that's another council, like in the German case, they do then another part of the job. So what matters is that an agency is understood here clearly as an agency who undertakes activities defined in part 2 of the ESG. So this is running quality assurance, external quality assurance procedures, and the agency should do that with very clear goals and explicit. And that is when the end, you can see why we do have diversity, why there is not the one way to do it. I think Hasan, maybe you someone is unmuted. And I think Hasan, you can perfect. So this is what really matters, is that you have a mission statement, you have a goal of an agency, and agencies do have very different goals in different systems, and that is very legitimate. So there is not one size fits all, and whatever is the mission of the agency, usually it is connected with quality control or quality enhancement, but agencies do also have further tasks that should also translate into the daily work. An issue of relevance that you can clearly identify across the board is that last little sentence that you see in the standard text. And the standard says agencies should ensure the involvement of stakeholders in their governance and work. And that basically means you cannot have the one actor, the one owner, who is then running the whole agency. There should be the stakeholder, and there is no explicit definition here in that standard of the specificity of what we mean with that. But there should be stakeholders involved in the work of the agency, so in the operational work, but also in the governance. And then again, governance structures usually differ a lot. So you have very, very different ways how to put this into practice. But there should be the stakeholders involved also at that level. What I would want to highlight as a second point regarding this standard is the fact on the guidelines. Again, here the guidelines are not prescriptive, but sometimes they can be very interesting to understand what the standard is looking for. So here you can see that the goal of what you see in the standard is that the institutions and the public trust the agencies. So it's the standard is not good as it is. You need to understand a little bit on what is the intention, and here it is about the trust of the public and the trust also of institutions. If we continue, and I will try to keep things as short so that we maybe I provoke a question here or there. Official status per se usually is not a very big problem, because the one way or the other, agencies need to have some kind of a legal entity. They need to be recognized as quality assurance by the competent public authorities. Again, whatever is the competent public authorities is very different between the different countries. But that official status, while usually in the reviews that you see and in the agencies, is not a big topic. It is very, very relevant. It easily becomes very relevant if we go to the next standard that deals with independent, because there is diversity in the way agencies are set up. You have some agencies who are either very close to the ministry, who are in some parts even part of the ministries. You have also the other end of the spectrum, where you have totally independent agencies that have no link to any government, but are very, very close to the market or are very close to the institutions. My agencies, for example, we are a membership organization. That basically means our members are institutions. That is the way we are set up. That is our legal basis. And if we then look at the next standard, which is independence, there you can basically see that the expectation toward an agency is to be independent and to act autonomously, with the full responsibilities for operations and outcome without third-party influence. And there you can clearly see there is a link between the way agencies are set up and the way agencies need to assure their own independence. Because if you are an agency that is very close to the setup of a ministry, probably the importance of independence from ministerial, from political influence, is of a different relevance than if you are an agency who is very close to either the institutions or the labor market or the industry, where you need to make sure that there is no undue influence of a third party from that direction. So the way an agency is designed clearly has an impact on the need to assure independence. And the guidelines here are very, very helpful because they outline organizational, operational, and independence of formal outcomes. And when I would basically carefully think about the discussions that we had in the last years, when I talk about diversity, this is a standard where you see very, very different institutional setups, how agencies achieve that independence, and sometimes are a problem for the independence of an agency. That is the question of who appoints the bodies, who appoints the decision makers in an agency, like how are internal checks and balances, how is it assured that for the operations, like the staff of the agency does not interfere too strongly in the work of a panel. That's all part of 3.3. The interesting part here is in the very last part. Sometimes that's a bit of a challenge. Is to solely base decisions on expertise. So that is basically the fact that you need to have an evidence-based approach. That is, and the decisions should be made based on the expertise of the people involved. So people act in personal capacities and do not usually represent certain institutions, even if they appoint these people. 3.3 is, I would rather say, one of the most critical ESG in that part. While every standard is equally important, that's very clear. But independence is a very, very sensitive one as it impacts many other parts as well. Thematic analysis, 3.4, that's like talking from experience. To me, that always reads so easy. So this is a standard that really that reads extraordinarily easy, because basically you said you regularly publish about the analysis of your general findings. If you would look at what agencies struggle with, I would clearly say 3.4 is one of the most complicated standards, because most agencies struggle to have compliance with that standard. What is the intention? Well, basically, and that's very clear, if as an agency you run procedures, you learn a lot. You learn a lot about not only that individual one procedure that you're running, but also about systemic issues that are the same across the board. And the intention is, looking at 3.1, it's the trust of institutions and the public that are of relevance for an agency, like to share about this, so that basically the public and institutions can learn about trends, about developments, and good practice. Why are agencies struggling so much? Well, doing that analysis usually requires resources, requires staff, and if it's a public institution, there is never enough resources. If it's a private institution, well, nobody pays for that. So there is this is an area of constant debate, and I think thematic analysis will remain a relevant issue for the discussions in the continuous years. You see many agencies who also do a great job in giving feedback to the institutions and to the field that they work with, but then they do not put that in reports, for example, and they don't publish reports on that, which then is a struggle for the standard, but it fulfills the intention. I'm very hopeful that the dialogue of the next 2-3 years will be a constructive one, and I hope that ENQA will contribute to that in a constructive way to give a raise to the voice of the agencies here. 3.5, resources. That's very straightforward. That's a very straightforward standard, and it looks at the appropriate resources on human level, also human resources, financial, to carry out the work. And interestingly here, this standard also has not only like agencies should run procedures, it even says like the resources should enable agencies to improve and to reflect on their practice and to inform the public. So if you are fully compliant with the resources standards, you should also have the resources available to inform the public. So it's not only running procedures and publishing the report. It also requires that moment of reflection, to continuous improvement as an agency yourself, and to inform the public about what is going on. Resources clearly is also linked again to 3.2, the official status. If you get your budget, if you get your money from the government, the limitations are different than if basically you are a self-financing agency that is on the free market, that basically has other challenges. So here it's really interesting. Again, there is diversity in how agencies run, how agencies operate, and how agencies to that extent also need to see how they can deal with the resources that are available to them. Internal quality assurance and professional conduct, very important. 3.6 does not only look at IQA. So we as agency representatives, like, we always assume that of course institutions must have an internal quality assurance system, but the same goes for us. And the standard does not only talk about internal quality assurance for our processes, but it also talks about the quality and integrity of our activity. So it's the integrity part, and that clearly is linked to the question of professional conduct. So this here is not only about, oh yes, we have a quality handbook, and there all of our procedures are implemented. This is also about the question of how we conduct our procedures, how we act professionally in the field. And that also includes an appropriate communication with the relevant authorities wherever we go. So that basically means the standard does not basically say like how things have to be done. So whatever is the level of activities we have, that needs to be reflected in our own quality assurance approach. And I can clearly say, like, from like, this is really impressive to see how different agencies work based on the different cultures. You do have cultures that are very quantitatively oriented, where you will have agencies who have big list of internal KPIs. And then you have other agencies who really take a very dialogue-oriented, quality-oriented approach, who have qualitative criteria. And that again underlines only that there is not one size fits all, even within the agencies. So the systems really look different. Sometimes even there are national regulations or regional regulations, if I think at my colleagues in Spain, for example, that have an impact there. And 3.7, that's the very short part here, to be honest, because that basically is an indicator of you need to be cyclically externally reviewed as an agency in order to fully comply with that. Some agencies just achieve that by simply undergoing that external review. And some other agencies have that already as part of their constitutional documents, where they basically outline that every, and then there is diversity, number of years, they have to be externally reviewed. Interestingly enough, this is also to see taking your own medicine is sometimes very helpful. So that's good if you are at the side of a university. You need to. It's good to know that also the agency that is coming to review you themselves, they have to be reviewed like cyclically within ENQA and ECAR. That's the 5-year term. So every 5 years the agency is reviewed themselves. And that's the level of self-reflection. For example, the ENQA decided to have an external review of their own agency review mechanism as well, because there is not only the compliance part with the ESG, there is also the enhancement part, how agency reviews can be improved. So what I tried to deliver to you is a very concise approach of agencies themselves have regulations that we have to follow, that we have to implement. That does not mean that the rules and the standards here are very prescriptive. There is a diversity possible, and that is usually needed. If I think, if I think about the colleagues I work with at UKAC, the UKAC approach is a very different one than the agency approach in my agency. But probably that is because we work in different systems. We need to fulfill different regulations, and whatever we do need to be fit for purpose. And that's why this diversity is welcome, and it's even supported by the ESG. I hope I have provoked some questions, some thoughts, and some comments. And otherwise, of course, I'm always very much looking forward to hearing from you, either right now or following this interaction here. As Hasan already said, I'm in Turkey quite frequently, Istanbul and Ankara, and I very much look forward to hearing from you now or later on. And with that, I give it back to Hasan, who probably either has a question from the chat or has a question himself.
Okay, Rooney, thank you very much for your very lovely, lively presentation and all the information that you provided to us. Yes, you go very frequently to Turkey, and talking to my colleagues in Cyprus, they're telling me that they are missing you as well. So that we expect that you visit us in North Cyprus as well. Now, you see, I looked at the PowerPoint presentations of the SEGA ESG Project 1, and one of the presentations was given by Colin Turk, the president of EQUAR. Now, in one of the slides, it was showing the compliance to ESG and the challenges. And it shows there that the main challenge in part 3 was related with independence and the thematic analysis. So that I would like to ask you, when we look at the guidelines, it just simply says that the thematic analysis, the report, will describe, analyze the general findings of their external quality assurance activities. Considering that you review quality assurance agencies, as well as you are a member of the review committee. Now, what are the main points that are missing in a thematic analysis? In order to get full point, what must be done from a typical failing thematic analysis report? What must it contain?
Yeah, thank you, Hasan. I think this is, I really like that you put finger exactly where it hurts, because the former director of EQUAR, like you said, Colin, a good friend of mine, like 3.4 is an issue for agencies. If you look at where you have the highest number of in the past substantial, or now it's partial compliance, this is 3.4, and I will offer two different perspectives on that. The one part is where I look at what we read in the reports on that, and I really encourage reading through that, is that some agencies basically took the position of, this is not our job. So we're not supposed to do that because we're there to implement the procedures, which basically means they decided not to do it, which I think no longer is the case. So there is a very constructive approach to that. There is also the part where you see that very often agencies take a different approach. They do not regularly publish reports as the standard requests. They, for example, put this in form of seminars, workshops, or conferences where they provide feedback and interact with their stakeholders and talk about what they have found, which, like personally, I would say is a very good thing to do for an agency, but it does not fully meet what the standard requires. The holistic idea, I think, of the standard is a very, very good one. Do not look at the individual pieces of the puzzle every time and ignore looking at the whole picture that it builds, but also make use of what you gain from working in a system. Like, for example, personally, we work a lot in a very big country in Asia, where we run a high number of procedures. And one of the first things that we decided to do together with the ministry is to say, okay, let's sit together and also look at what are common issues. So what are structural elements that might be of hindering quality development here? So that's the one part. Personally, I also believe, and this is what I try to also indicate, I think 3.4, if we look through the eyes of the ESG, on the ESG, 3.4 might no longer be the fittest for purpose standard. Because if you look at the genesis of the ESG, like 2015, there was not a major update on this standard. Was touched in 2015 because it no longer expected systemic reviews, but even from 2005, it's already there, regularly published reports, and I think we're beyond that point now. I think we can dare to discuss, is this standard fit for purpose, or can we have a little bit more diversity on how we try to aim that to achieve that goal. But that's I'm very careful here. That's personal opinion. I'm a very strong lobbyist for that within the frameworks, because I think the intention of the standard is great. The way it is phrased is a bit too prescriptive. So we need to open up there. And we need to onboard the institutions, so EUA, we need to and EURASHI and ESU for that. But I think that's what is ahead, and that's, I mean, nobody knows how that goes. That's on our shoulders, with the support of I hope the Turkish colleagues and the institutions. We need the institutions for that. Always very clear, because we're not doing quality assurance for ourselves, we're doing it for the institutions, and that's an area of development, I would put.
Okay, Bruni, thank you very much, and I will stop there, but before I do that, I would like to make a suggestion, an advice to anyone really interested. It is possible that if they visit ENQA webpage, they will be able to see a number of reviewed reports. Not only the reviewed reports, but also the self-assessment report of the agencies. So that if one goes over the recommendations, I think that will provide a good understanding in any one of the standard criteria which is not met. Okay, this is just my opinion, and I just wanted to share with all of the participants. And I have to move on to our last speaker. And before I introduce Professor Robert, I would like to give a little information about SEGA. What is the meaning of SEGA ESG Project 1? SEGA is supporting European quality assurance agencies in meeting European standards and guidelines. So there is a project, and project 1 is completed. And in this project, there was Albania, Czech Republic, Malta, Moldova, Montenegro, and Slovakia. So that 6 countries, they went through this project and tried to find out or benefit, how they can comply, how they can achieve the compliance with the ESG. And currently, the project is continuing with another 5 countries as Project 2. Bosnia, 2 quality assurance agencies there, Ukraine, Serbia, and Azerbaijan. So that it is a great pleasure today to have Professor Robert Redhammer with us, because he's going to tell us about how they benefited from this project, as well as the Slovakia Quality Assurance Agency have been reviewed very recently, so that it will be, they're coming from this process very new. And I'm sure that there will be a number of things that Professor Robert Redhammer would like to share with us. So I'm very grateful to him that he accepted our offer to be an invited speaker in our conference. Now, Professor Redhammer, he's the very first chair of the executive board of the Slovak Accreditation Agency for Higher Education. Before taking this job, he worked for 22 years at the university, the Slovak University of Technology. The last 8 years, he was the rector. The previous 8 years, he was the vice rector, and then 6 years as the vice dean of the Faculty of Electrical Engineering and Information Technology. So that he is very well equipped with things that are going on in the universities, as well as in the quality assurance agencies. So it's a pleasure for me to introduce him and then to leave him the floor. Okay, Professor Robert Redhammer, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, Professor Bichan. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for having me here. It's a great honor for me. And while we are a very new agency, so I would like to more share our experience, what we've done in the last few years, than to explain the rules, because we are approaching them, and hopefully we are in line, we are compliant with ESG. Yes, Professor is right that we have recently had the review panel from NCAR, and it was in March somehow, and these days we are waiting for the publication of the report. So we are not ready yet, but we are hopefully we will be successful. So I would like to share a few things first, and so I would like to share whether it's, you can see it. So first, okay, so first about Slovakia and our agency and the circumstances that we started with the ESG, and then I will went through our experience with the introduction of ESG in Slovak higher education institutions. First of all, Slovakia is a relatively small country with more than 5 million inhabitants, but very highly manufacturing industry. So there is a quite demand of certain professions, and also for the higher education institutions. We do have 33 institutions, 20 of them are public, 3 are states, sorry for mistake, and 10 private. And country is challenging quite large brain drain. So our idea is to improve the quality of the higher education institutions and the reputation, and in this way to attract more talent. So that's something behind. The reason why a new agency was started was that in 2013 there was a non-compliant result from the ENCA agency review of that former accreditation commission. The commission was the body that was connecting to the government, and the decision was made by minister itself. So that was not compliant the independence, and there were some other issues. So there was prepared the new legislation, the new act, and there was a quite big fight in the parliament when it was adopted during the adoption process, and the Slovak Rectors Conference and the Council of Higher Education Institutions were fighting mainly about the ownership of the agency. So who will be in which positions and who will have the rights to appoint the government body and so on. So that was the main find. It was somewhere in 2018, and as a result there was adopting new legislation and creating new agency, the Slovak Accreditation Agency for Higher Education. And the main idea behind was to create agency which is fully compliant with the ESG, and to put the rights and the approvals for this body to take all the steps necessary to get into the ENCA and ECAR register and so on. So this is some kind of main task, which is not directly written in the law, but it's on the background of that. So the key point solving the independency was that the executive board is creating by 2 nominees from each stakeholder association. So the Slovak Rectors Conference, the Council of Higher Education Institution, 2 people, Students' Council of Higher Education Institution, 2 people, and employment associations. And the chair is choosing by other procedure, but all these 4, in fact 5, because also the ministry is taking part in that procedure, takes part, so it's well balanced. Since March, the 2020, the agency starts to operate and starts to build all the necessary things what is necessary. The agency is a public body, so it's under the other regulations, other laws that are covered, that are covering the public entities. So one of the first tasks was to issue the accreditation standards according to our law. From ESG point of view, those are those criteria which are necessary to be published, and the same for all institutions that are accredited. So we published it, we developed them from the ESG part 1. Of course, the general parts, but ESG part 1, because these are some norms or some standards for internal quality assurance regulation inside the higher education institutions. So they are a little bit more adapted to the Slovak circumstances, the realities, and the legislation, higher education legislation, but in fact they are very well taking the part 1 of the ESG into account. So all stakeholders should be involved in these processes. So we make a lot of consultation when preparing these standards, so this criteria, and then also we manage the public commented procedures. We received a lot of comments because in the former time there was very much dependent on the number and quality of publication of the professors to get the accreditation. So it was very much influenced by this former experience by the people at the universities. So, but we accepted quite a lot of them, majority partially or fully. So we hope that we satisfy the academic people. We issued that in 2020, and the universities or higher education institutions generally, they got 2 years for accommodation to comply with those standards or criteria and starts to implement that. So now what was the issue? The main issue was that the institutions has many components of the internal quality assurance. So they had a lot of regulation and a lot of things they've done, but they didn't done it systematic. So in systematic approach. So they were missing the top management things and the policies and so on for the quality assurance. So the core was missing, but lot of the bricks were there. So the task was to make systematic approach for quality assurance inside the institutions, and they start to adopt it, and they create the policies, structures, processes within this 2 years period, and they start to revise the study programs. In fact, they reduce number of study programs registered by ministry from 6,500 to 3,500. So they really got through the study programs and reviewed them. Now they had the must, so they had to apply for institutional accreditation. The law is saying that every 6 years they have to go through the institutional accreditation. In fact, this is some kind of initial institutional accreditation where we have to assess the internal quality assurance system at each institution. So this is a procedure which is we believe compliant with the ESG part 2. So the accreditation, in fact, it is we call it, or the ESG call it, external quality assurance. So we try to go in line with this regulation. So each of the 33 higher education institutions are now undergoing this accreditation. Even these days are at 2 institutions the site visits. The review panels created for each institution individually is going on the school and is doing the assessment. And we hope in end of this year we start to publish the results and the decisions. The main important thing is that the main result when the institutions has the internal system compliant with the accreditation standards, so with the criteria, they will gain the rights to prepare an approved new study program in their own power. So they will. It's a little bit similar to German system when new study programs, the institutions has the right to start in their own without additional external accreditation of individual study program. So therefore, it is quite important to go in more details. And now, the SEQUA project was one of the projects that was helping us quite a lot in approaching to ESG, because we hadn't very much experience with ESG. We had experiences with the accreditation processes of the individual study programs, but not with the internal system. So that was really of great help. The key point was that in the first meeting when we had within the project, we put on the desk all the issues that were the main challenges that we feel that were main challenges, and we have been able to name the critical points, and within this SEQUA project we got afterwards several topical seminars and dealing with those topics. For example, for us as a small country, the independent reviewer is one of the issues, because we do not have a lot of independent reviewers, while each professor knows each other, so it's quite difficult. So therefore we have to mix the review panel with reviewers also from abroad. We have to improve and to take very much care about the training of reviewers, which is sometimes very difficult when you have to train professors for something what is very specific. So there are some issues on that part, but we got really very good support, and we hope that we met all the criteria in ESG to be fully compliant or compliant with ESG. What is the current status quo with the ENCA agency review? Sorry for mistake. We are waiting for the publication of the review report. We had in March, there were review panel here. They reviewed 52%. Half of them have been outside the agency, and the inside was in fact also outside, because there are our reviewers which in fact are external experts, not employed in agency. And there were 17 meetings. They were issued and interviewed and checked all these standards which are in ESG part 2 and part 3. So we have been discussing quite a lot, and I think it was really very useful discussion and very fair. I would say that fair. Even I didn't. It is not published the result, the review report, but we feel that the review was very fair, and we hope it will help us also for further improvement. The next steps will be very simple. We will wait for the review report, and when we finish the reviews of the higher education institutions, so we'll make the feedbacks from the institutions and summarize all those issues that we will collect, and we will change the processes, and we will try to improve it either internal or with a small, minor, or more larger change of law or regulation. That some of the regulation is issued by ministry. So we will communicate, and hopefully we will improve it more significant, because we have only 4 years now, so we do not have enough experience. But after finishing this a lot of accreditation processes, so we will be able to improve the processes significantly. I think I will rather wait for questions. It might be better to ask me for those things that are interesting for you, and that's from the beginning. For the beginning, from me all. Thank you.
Okay. I would like to thank to Professor Robert Redhammer. Excuse me, can we turn off the microphone, please? Okay, then. Okay, Professor Redhammer.
Şeyi çok istedim hocam. O toplantısı hatırlıyorsunuz değil mi? Ulaşmalarında
I have read the challenges that you face of being a small country with this conflict of interest between the reviewers and all that. And now it's just that there you might be a little bit disadvantageous position, but being a small country, and as I could see, you are carrying out both institutional and program accreditation as the QA of Slovakia in higher education. So you are doing both institutional and program accreditation. And when I looked at there are too many programs, and there is the challenge of conflict of interest between the reviews. If you had been doing only institutional accreditation, life would have been easier. Now, considering, and when you look at Turkey, in Turkey, we have YÖKAK only carrying out institutional accreditation of 220 universities, and program accreditations are left to local quality assurance agencies, 22 of them, and another 13 international. Now, being small and so many programs, do you have two sets of criteria, one for institutional, one for program? And what are the challenges of reviewing and accrediting programs in Slovakia?
Yes, we have to follow the legislation as well as the ESG. So sometimes it's quite difficult and challenging to combine it, but I think it's possible. We issued, because the law required to issue the institutional criteria. So it's for the internal quality assurance systems in higher education, and they have to they have to be compliant with those accreditation standards, so criteria by ESG. Those are fixed to the part 1 of ESG. So there must be a system approach. There must be some regulation for study programs, for teachings, and so on. On the other hand, we have also issued these criteria, ESG criteria for accreditation, so standards for study programs, because for those institutions that are not active in some field and cycle, they should apply for accreditation of individual study programs to us, and we have to accredit it. So they are definitely written criteria for study programs. And the logic is that if the institution is implementing their own system which is compliant to the standards, also it's believed that the study programs are compliant with the standards for study programs. It means that they have to fulfill all those particular requirements. So if we are now evaluating the institutional systemic approach, so we have to check also the study fields where they are active, the institutions. So we have to touch practically the majority of the study programs and check whether they comply with the study programs criteria. So that's the reason. They are very similar, but they are individually written for study programs and for systemic approach, but they have fulfill all those. Of course, that's the issue for us. While if the institution is a small one with 1 or 2 study programs, so it's very easy. We can create 5-member review panel and that's it. But we always put there students and somebody from employment association or somebody from external stakeholder. So that's the 5 people is okay. But when the institution says 30 fields, so we have to cover all those 30 fields. So we are combining. We must not have in the panel, nobody from the panel must have any relation to those institution that is reviewed. And that in certain fields it's difficult, especially when there is only 1 or 2 institutions in Slovakia dealing in that particular field. So then we are looking for expert abroad not to have direct links with reviewed institutions. So that's our solution. But we have to work with that. And while we are going through all the institutions, in fact, through all the branches or all the fields at Slovak institutions, so we now have quite a lot of people in our list of reviewers, which we have to make public. So it's published every half year. That's also is creating some difficulties, but we are keeping it. I think the track is fine, that we can cover it. In particular things, particular fields, particular very subfields, very small, tiny. We are not able to cover it, but with a wider scope, it's covered. So if in the future, when there will be some possibility to change the regulation, so we will very likely we will be willing to split it, the field accreditation from the systemic accreditation. But now it's together.
Okay. I would like to thank Professor Redhammer. He took us all the way through the stairs in their activities to fulfill compliance with the ESG and their experience with the SEGA ESG project as well. So I would like to thank him very much. And when I looked at the clock in front of me, it's exactly 1 o'clock. And I would like to thank you once again to our invited speakers. It had been a very informative and very beneficial meeting today. And we hope that in due course, STAR could and would arrange such webinars. So I would like to thank once again to our invited speakers, as well as Gökhan, as well as our president and our colleagues, and as well as the participants who stayed with us all throughout. Now, we would like to take a picture, a group picture. So those who are with us on the screen, I will invite them to open their screens just for a picture, please. Okay. Let us smile as good as Galatasaray supporters, as we won Manchester United last night 3-2. Okay, so thank you very much for being with us. And now I would like to keep the invited speakers and as well as our president of STAR, Ali Hoca, Ali Bayraktaroğlu, as well as Dr. Ayşegül as well, just to take a picture with our speakers, as well as our president and YÖKAK representative. So I would like to thank all of the other participants, and I will be very happy if they can turn off their cameras.